Welcome to the infinite mythos.
Imagine begging a goddess for safety, but she twists you into a monster. Snakes gnaw at your neck while a child grows inside, planted by the one who broke you. Death is not a nightmare, it's mercy. The hero is not here to save the princess. He is here to execute a pregnant victim and carve the life out of her cursed flesh. Chapter 1. The hunt for beauty. He had found her at the fountain. Medusa had been filling a clay amphora when the water turned black. Not murky, black, as if the sun itself had drowned. The smell hit her next, brine and rot, the stench of things that died in ocean trenches. She dropped the vessel. It shattered against the stones, but she was already running, her bare feet slapping the cobblestones as she fled toward the only sanctuary she knew. Poseidon. The earth shaker. The god who had watched her for weeks from every puddle, every wave, every drop of rain sliding down temple walls. She had pretended not to notice. She had prayed for his attention to pass. But gods did not lose interest. Gods took what they wanted. Behind her, the air split with the sound of 1,000 wings. She did not look back. Her lungs screamed. Her calves burned. The streets of Athens blurred past, shuttered windows, sleeping dogs, the distant glow of torches, and she climbed toward the Acropolis, toward Athena's house, toward the one place a sea god should not follow. The bronze doors of the temple loomed ahead. Medusa threw herself against them, and the metal groaned inward under her weight. Sacred darkness swallowed her whole. She stumbled across the threshold, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The polished marble spread beneath her feet, cold, slick, endless. Moonlight fell through the columns in silver bars, striping her body as she ran deeper into the sanctuary. The familiar smell of incense and olive oil wrapped around her, and for one desperate heartbeat she believed she was safe. The belief died when salt coated her lips. The ocean had followed her inside. She could taste it on her tongue, feel its pressure building at the base of her skull. Water should not be here. The sea lay far below the Acropolis, yet somehow Poseidon's domain was seeping through the very stones, turning the temple floor slick with brine. She ran faster. Her white peplum, cinched at the waist with a golden cord she had woven herself, clung to her sweat-dampened skin. The fabric whispered against her thighs as she bolted between the Doric columns, their shadows stretching impossibly tall. Each pillar she passed seemed to lean inward, narrowing her path, funneling her deeper into the labyrinth of marble and moonlight. Her hair, that cursed, magnificent hair, streamed behind her like a banner of gold and chestnut. How many times had worshippers paused mid-prayer to stare at those locks? How many times had the high priestess ordered her to braid them tighter, to hide them beneath a veil? She should have listened. She should have shaved her head and doused herself in ash. Anything to escape the hungry gaze of a god. A ceremonial chalice appeared in her path. She vaulted over it. The bronze vessel spun across the marble with a ringing clatter that echoed between the columns like mocking laughter. The pursuing darkness paused, she could sense it, a vast attention savoring her fear, and she used the stolen second to sprint the final distance. The inner sanctum. Athena Parthenos rose before her, 12 meters of ivory and gold rendered in the shape of a woman. The statue's skin glowed faintly, lit from within by some divine radiance. Her golden robes fell in rigid folds, each crease catching the flicker of oil lamps arranged at her sandaled feet. One massive hand gripped a spear. The other cradled Nike, the winged goddess of victory, small as a child in the Titan's palm. And those eyes, gems set in ivory, gray as winter storms, stared down with absolute, terrible stillness. "Help me," Medusa gasped. She collapsed against the base of the statue, her fingers scrabbling against the painted stone. "Please. I am your servant. I have given you my life, the roof above her head exploded. No, not exploded. Opened. parted like a wound, letting in something vast and wet and reeking of the abyssal deep. Feathers the color of storm clouds filled her vision, each one large enough to carpet a bedchamber. The wings stretched wider than the sanctum itself, their tips scraping against the columns with a shriek of keratin on marble. Water cascaded from the creature's body, pooling across the floor in salt rivers that crept toward Medusa's bare toes. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against Athena's golden hem. The bird shape descended, and as it landed before the altar, she understood why no legend had ever adequately described the terror of facing a god. Poseidon wore the form of a monstrous hawk, his plumage dripping with brine. Where eyes should have been, two whirlpools churned in miniature, the eternal spiraling of water devouring itself. His talons scored trenches in the floor her ancestors had polished with their bare hands. His beak, curved and cruel, opened to release a sound no bird had ever made, the grinding crash of tectonic plates shifting beneath the ocean. He did not speak. Gods of his magnitude communicated in pressure, in the sudden certainty of drowning while standing on dry land. Medusa's ears popped. Her vision blurred. She could not breathe, could not move, could not do anything but watch as the nightmare folded its wings and stepped closer. Her hand closed around a bronze fire pan. She did not remember reaching for it. Instinct, animal and desperate, hurled her arm forward, and the pan struck the hawk god's chest with a clang that shattered the sacred silence. Coals scattered across the wet floor, hissing and dying. The blow achieved nothing. Worse than nothing. The whirlpool eyes focused on her with new intensity, and Medusa saw something in their spiraling depths, not anger, not even desire in any human sense. Entitlement. The absolute certainty of a predator confronting prey. She clawed at his plumage, raking her nails across feathers harder than iron. She screamed Athena's name until her throat bled. She kicked, bit, thrashed against the weight pressing her down to the altar steps, the same steps she had scrubbed clean each dawn, the same steps where she had laid offerings of barley and honey, the same steps where she had prostrated herself in worship 1,000 times. The cold marble bit into her spine. The peplum she had woven tore with a sound like a sob. And above her, through the blur of tears and terror, Athena's gemstone eyes continued their eternal, empty stare. Nothing human remained in the next minutes. She became a creature of pure reflex, flinching, gasping, counting her heartbeats because they were the only proof she still existed. The god did not hurry. Oceans never hurried. They simply rose and rose until everything drowned. When the weight vanished, she did not understand at first. She lay on the ruined altar steps, tasting blood where she had bitten through her lip. The temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the puddles of seawater. And the hawk god was gone, simply absent, as though he had never descended. Medusa curled into herself, a fist of shivering flesh. She pressed her forehead against the stone and wept, the sounds ragged and ugly, echoing through the violated sanctuary. Her torn peplum barely covered her. Bruises bloomed across her thighs. Something inside her had cracked open, some vessel that would never hold faith again. Athena. The name came out broken, a prayer without hope. Athena, I served you. I served you with everything I had. Please. The statue moved. Not a trick of the flickering lamps. Not exhaustion conjuring phantoms. The ivory head turned, slow as glaciers, until those grey gemstone eyes fixed on the broken girl at her feet. When Athena spoke, the voice came from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the very air, a sound of stone scraping stone, of logic stripped of mercy. You have brought filth into my house. Medusa's head jerked up. What? No, please, he attacked me, I tried to, you wore your beauty like a banner. The voice ground on, indifferent to her words. You let your hair flow loose when you should have hidden it. You drew his gaze with your vanity, and you brought his lust to my altar. I did not, the denial caught in her throat. Cold seeped into her bones, a cold far worse than the winter air. I did not choose this. I would never. Poseidon is my uncle. The sea is his dominion, I cannot touch him. But you? The statue's lips did not move, yet the words grew sharper. You are mine. You have always been mine. And you have made yourself unclean. Medusa tried to stand. Her legs refused. She crawled forward, reaching for the goddess's golden sandals, her bloodied fingers grasping at metal that burned with frost. Cleanse me, she begged. I will do anything. Any penance. Strip me of my beauty if you must, shave my head, scar my face, yes. The single word struck her silent. Your beauty invited this corruption. Let your beauty become the corruption itself. Let the hair you prized above my wisdom become the serpents that will torment you. Let your gaze, which sought admiration, become a weapon that destroys everything you see. No, Medusa's voice cracked into a scream. No, please, I was faithful, I was. The transformation began in her scalp. Fire. Not figurative, actual flame, burrowing into her skull, rewriting her from the roots outward. Each strand of gold-brown hair twisted, thickened, split into something muscular and alive. She clawed at her head, trying to tear the agony away, but her fingers met scales instead of skin. Wet coils looped around her wrists. Forked tongues tasted her tears. She screamed until her voice shattered into something animal. Her nails lengthened into talons, her teeth erupted into fangs, her tongue forked and she could taste the salt of her own blood in doubled measure. The temple floor rushed up to meet her, and when her hands struck the marble, they left grooves in the stone. Her face. Something was happening to her face. The skin stretched tight over bones rearranging themselves, and when she turned instinctively toward a polished bronze shield abandoned by some long-ago supplicant, the thing staring back was not Medusa. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils. Fangs jutting past cracked lips. A crown of vipers hissing their newborn hunger. Her reflection held her gaze for one eternal second. She could not look away. And in the depths of those monstrous eyes, she watched herself shatter, the pious girl, the faithful servant, the woman who had believed the gods rewarded virtue, fragmenting into shards she would never reassemble. Above her, Athena's statue had resumed its eternal stillness, justice delivered, attention moved elsewhere. The goddess of wisdom had spoken her verdict. The goddess of war had chosen her enemy. Medusa opened her new mouth and screamed, but the sound emerging was no longer human. It rolled through the sanctuary like an avalanche, the death cry of a girl, the birth cry of a monster, and somewhere in the city below, dogs began to howl at a terror they could not name. Chapter 2 Prison of Flesh. The first thing she heard was not the surf. Medusa's consciousness surfaced through layers of blackness, dragged upward by a sound, wet, heavy, rhythmic, coiling against her ears. Something slithered across her temple. Something else tightened around her throat. She tried to lift her hand, to brush away what she assumed was kelp or rope or the remnants of a nightmare, but her fingers met resistance, muscular, scaled, alive. Her eyes snapped open. The sky above was the color of old bruises, smeared with clouds the wind had torn into ribbons. Beneath her spine, volcanic rock jutted through the thin layer of salt crust covering this forsaken shore. Each breath brought the stench of sulfur and rotting seaweed into her lungs. But none of these sensations registered beyond a distant awareness, because the writhing mass around her skull demanded every fraction of her attention. Vipers. Dozens of them. Black-green bodies thick as her wrists, their scales rasping against one another as they shifted and coiled. She could see them in her peripheral vision, tongues flickering, testing the air, tasting her terror. They moved with unified hunger, a crown of fangs she had not asked for and could not remove. Medusa screamed. The sound emerged hoarse, shredded by the forked tongue she had forgotten she now possessed. The scream startled the serpents. They reacted as a pack, rearing, hissing, striking. Fangs punctured the soft flesh of her shoulders. Her collarbones. The space behind her ears. Venom pumped into her bloodstream, liquid fire spreading through her veins, and she thrashed against the rocks, clawing at the creatures rooted in her own skull. She could not pull them free. They were her. Fused to the bone, growing from follicles that had once produced golden brown hair. The venom did not kill her. Of course it did not. Athena's curse ran deeper than mortality. Instead, the poison pulsed beneath her skin in waves of agony, cresting, receding, cresting again, a tide she would learn to predict but never escape. The snakes settled after their initial frenzy, satisfied by the blood seeping from their bite wounds, and Medusa lay rigid on the rocks, counting the spaces between breaths. Her body had become its own prison. The guards lived in her hair. Time passed in a haze of salt and suffering. The sun moved across the bruised sky, occasionally piercing the cloud cover to illuminate this wasteland in shades of gray and ochre. Medusa did not count the hours. She counted heartbeats, breaths, the intervals between snake bites. At some point, thirst overrode fear, and she forced herself to move. Crawling was easier than walking. The weight of the serpents pulled her head sideways, straining muscles she had never used before. Her taloned hands scraped grooves in the volcanic stone as she dragged herself inland, following a sound her mortal ears could barely detect, the trickle of fresh water over rock. The stream appeared between two jutting formations of black obsidian, narrow as her arm, collecting in a shallow basin before seeping down into some underground darkness. Medusa lowered her face toward the water. Her lips cracked from salt and dehydration, her tongue swollen. She needed this. She needed to drink and survive, though why she should want survival remained a question she could not answer. She saw herself in the surface. The pool was still, sheltered from wind, and it reflected the sky above, and the creature hovering at its edge. Yellow eyes stared up at her. Vertical pupils contracted in the dim light. The face surrounding them bore no resemblance to the one she had possessed in Athens. The bones had shifted, the jaw had elongated, the skin had cracked into patterns resembling dried earth. And above this ruin, the serpents writhed, their bodies creating a constantly moving halo of scales and fangs. Medusa recoiled. Her hand struck the obsidian behind her, and the impact sent a shard skittering across the rock with a sharp clatter. The sound drew attention she had not anticipated. A seagull wheeled overhead, riding the thermal currents above the island's heated stones. Its white wings caught the filtered sunlight. Its cry, sharp, curious, echoed across the barren landscape as it descended to investigate the noise. Medusa raised her head to track the movement. Instinct. Reflex. The reaction of any creature to potential threat or prey. Their gazes met for less than a heartbeat. The transformation happened faster than she could process. The gull's white feathers stiffened into granite plumes. Its open beak froze mid-cry, wings spread wide in a position they would hold for eternity. The bird dropped, suddenly heavy with stone, and struck the water with a crack that split it into 3 pieces. Stone organs. Stone bones. Stone blood vessels. The anatomy of the creature preserved in perfect, horrifying detail as it sank through the shallow pool and settled on the bottom. Medusa scrambled backward, pressing her palms against her eyes. Her snakes hissed in protest at the sudden movement, several of them striking her forearms, but she did not care. She could not care. Her gaze had turned a living creature to rock. Her eyes, the same eyes that had once been called the color of a calm morning sea, had become weapons she could not sheath. She heard herself making sounds. Whimpering. Keening. The wordless expressions of an animal in agony. The serpents joined in, their hissing creating a chorus of distress that echoed off the obsidian formations. How could she exist in a world she would kill by accident? The cave found her before she found it. She stumbled through the island's interior with her eyes squeezed shut, guided by touch and the sound of wind whistling through rock formations. Her hands bled from gripping obsidian edges. Her knees bled from falls she could not prevent. The snakes bit her whenever she jostled them too violently, adding new puncture wounds to the constellation already marking her shoulders. The entrance felt like a mouth, damp air exhaling across her face, carrying the scent of stone and something older, muskier. She crawled inside, grateful for the darkness her closed lids could not provide. Here, at least, there was nothing alive for her gaze to destroy. The scrape of metal on rock announced she was not alone. "Sister." The voice ground out of a throat never designed for human speech. It resonated through the cave like the vibration of a struck bell, deep and strange and oddly tender. "Our poor, beautiful sister." At last. A second voice joined the first, higher in pitch, with a buzzing undertone. "Athena's gift has reached us. We felt the change ripple through the blood. Mother wept. Father laughed. And we have waited." Medusa opened her eyes. Two shapes emerged from the deeper darkness, massive, winged, armored in scales that caught the thin light filtering through cracks in the cave ceiling. The first was Athena, broader than any human, her body covered in copper plating, her mouth filled with tusks jutting past lips that could not fully close. The second was Euryale, more serpentine in build, her golden wings folded against a frame that seemed to shift between feminine and reptilian. They were the Gorgon sisters. Her sisters. The immortal beings she had fled from as a child, repulsed by their monstrous forms, desperate to prove she was different. She was no longer different. "Come," Athena rumbled, extending arms that could crush marble. "Let us hold you. Let us teach you the freedom of this skin." They embraced her before she could refuse. Metal and scale pressed against her battered body, cold and hard, offering protection but no softness. Euryale's wings wrapped around the three of them, creating a cocoon of golden feathers sharp enough to cut. The serpents in Medusa's hair hissed warnings at the proximity of other predators, but the Gorgon sisters ignored them. "You are beautiful now," Euryale crooned. "You are one of us. The humans will never hurt you again." Athena produced something wet and red from the shadows, meat, freshly torn from some creature Medusa could not identify. "Eat. Your new children are hungry." She gestured toward the vipers. "Feed them, or they will feed on you." Medusa stared at the raw flesh. Her human mind recoiled. Her serpent mouth watered. "I do not," her voice caught on the forked tongue. "I do not want this. Any of this." "Want?" Athena tilted her massive head, tusks clicking together. "Want is for mortals. You are beyond want. You are beyond choice. This is what Athena made you, and it is glorious. It is a curse. A curse is a gift you have not yet learned to use," Euryale replied. "Give it time, sister. Give it centuries. You will come to love the power. Centuries." The word settled into Medusa's bones with the weight of a mountain. Her sisters were immortal. They spoke of time as humans spoke of hours. And was she now like them? Would the curse bind her to this form for eternity, unable to die, unable to escape? She pulled away from their embrace, sharp wing feathers slicing her arms. I need to think." The sisters exchanged glances, their monstrous faces unreadable. They did not pursue her when she retreated to the farthest corner of the cave, folding herself into the smallest shape she could manage. They did not understand. They had never been human. Night brought no peace. The serpents did not sleep in unison. One would drowse, and another would rouse, and the shifting weight on her skull created a constant, maddening sensation of movement. Medusa discovered she could not close her eyes without seeing the gull's frozen body. Could not stop hearing the crack of its stone flesh against the water. Sometime in the deepest hours, when even her sister's breathing had settled into the rhythm of ancient rest, she found the obsidian shard she had carried from the stream. It caught the faint moonlight seeping through the cave's entrance. Sharp. Gleaming. A promise. Medusa raised the blade to her scalp and began to cut. The snakes felt the attack before the obsidian made contact. They reared, striking, injecting venom into her hands, her wrists, her face. She ignored the pain. She had transcended pain hours ago, ascending into some higher state of desperate purpose. The blade bit into scales, severed muscle, released a flood of black blood. Serpent heads fell around her. 3. 5. 7. Each one hit the cave floor, still biting, still hissing, still alive in some diminished sense. She cut deeper, trying to reach the roots, trying to carve out the curse Athena had planted in her skull. New heads emerged from the stumps. Not one to replace one, but 2, 3, 4, sprouting faster than she could cut, hydra-like in their regeneration. The blood loss should have weakened her, instead, it only seemed to feed the growth. Within minutes, her crown of vipers had doubled, tripled, become a seething mass of serpents so thick she could barely lift her head. She dropped the obsidian and screamed until her throat tore, until her sisters jolted awake and pinned her to the cave floor, preventing her from harming herself further. "You cannot cut them out," Athena said, not unkindly. "Others have tried. The curse adapts. It always adapts." "Kill me," Medusa gasped. "Please. Kill me." The sisters' grip loosened. Euryale's face twisted into something approaching sorrow. "We cannot, little one. You are blood. You are nest. Even if we wished it, and we do not, the ancient law forbids the killing of kindred." "Someone will," Athena added. "Someday. A hero, a fool, a desperate man with nothing left to lose. They always come eventually. But until then, you must endure. Endure. The cruelest word in any language." Dawn arrived like a wound reopening. Medusa lay where her sisters had left her, surrounded by the fallen bodies of severed snake heads, now stone themselves, the power of her gaze having destroyed them in the night. The new serpents writhed atop her skull, still settling into their places, still learning the geography of her flesh. And beneath the exhaustion, beneath the horror, she noticed something else. A weight. Low in her belly. Not the ordinary heaviness of a body abused and starving, but something distinct, separate, alive. It pulsed with its own rhythm, its own warmth, a counterpoint to the cold scales covering every other inch of her transformed skin. She pressed her clawed hand against the curve below her navel. The memories she had buried erupted upward, the altar steps, the hawk god's weight, the endless minutes when she had ceased to be a person and become only a vessel for someone else's hunger. Poseidon had taken more than her dignity. He had planted something inside her, a seed of divine origin growing in soil made of mortal flesh. She was pregnant. The realization should have broken her. Instead, it clarified everything. Her body was a prison, yes. But it was also a tomb for creatures who had committed no crime, who had not asked to be conceived, who waited in darkness for a birth that would never come naturally. Her cursed flesh could not open for them. Her serpent children would tear her apart before labor could begin. The only way to free them was to shatter the vessel entirely. Medusa pressed her forehead against the cold stone floor and laughed, a sound so wrong, so shattered, that her sisters stirred uneasily in their sleep. She did not want to live. But now she had a reason to wait for death. Somewhere in the world, a hero was being born. A blade was being forged. A quest was being assigned by gods who arranged mortal fates like pieces on a game board. He would come. And when he did, she would not flee. She would not fight. She would offer her throat to the blade and pray the children emerged unharmed. Outside the cave, the sun rose over the edge of the world, painting the barren island in shades of gold and rust. The waves crashed against the cliffs. The wind whistled through the obsidian formations. And Medusa began her vigil, counting the days until liberation arrived wearing the face of an executioner. Chapter 3 Instrument of Fate. The clouds parted beneath him like curtains before a stage, and Perseus laughed. He had never imagined flight would taste like this, wind scraping his teeth, tears streaming from the corners of his eyes, the whole world reduced to a blur of blue and white racing past his peripheral vision. The sandals of Hermes thrummed against his ankles, their wings beating faster than any bird's, propelling him westward with a velocity no mortal vessel could match. Below, the Aegean stretched to every horizon, its waves reduced to wrinkles on the face of infinity. He was invisible. The helm of Hades pressed cold against his skull, erasing his body from the perception of gods and men alike. When he extended his arm, nothing appeared, not skin, not sinew, not the white-knuckled grip of his fingers around the adamantine sickle. He existed as pure momentum, a thought given direction, an arrow loosed from Olympus itself. The son of Zeus. He rolled the phrase across his tongue and almost believed it. Somewhere behind him, on the tiny island of Seriphos, his mother waited in a stone cell. King Polydectes had promised to marry her by force if Perseus failed to return with a monster's head. The deadline approached. The stakes could not be higher. Yet here, above the clouds, with divine weapons strapped to his body and the map of the Greece tucked against his hip, Perseus permitted himself to imagine victory. He would descend like thunder. He would strike while the creature slept. He would return a hero, draped in glory, and no king would dare touch Danae again. The fantasy sustained him across the endless water. The change came without warning. One moment, Perseus soared through sunlight bright enough to bleach bone. The next, he crossed an invisible threshold, and the world dimmed as though a god had cupped hands over the sun. The temperature plummeted. His breath emerged in silver plumes, crystallizing on his lips before the wind tore it away. The helm of Hades, already cold, began to burn against his temples, a frost so deep it seared. He descended through a layer of cloud and emerged into a landscape carved from nightmare. The island of Sarpedon sprawled below him, black cliffs rising from black water, their surfaces slick with salt and something darker. No green grew here. No color survived. The rock formations jutted toward the sky like broken teeth, their edges sharp enough to gut a ship. Steam rose from fissures in the volcanic stone, carrying the stench of sulfur and decay. The ocean surrounding this place moved wrong, sluggish, oily, its waves refusing to crest properly. Perseus gagged. The air itself seemed poisoned, thick with rot and ammonia. His eyes watered. His stomach clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to turn, to flee, to return to the world of light and leave this abomination to its solitude. But Danae's face surfaced in his memory. Her bruised wrists. The fear in her voice when she whispered about the king's intentions. He angled downward. The statues appeared as he dropped below the cliff line. At first, Perseus mistook them for natural formations, pillars of gray stone weathered into vaguely humanoid shapes by centuries of wind and rain. He adjusted his grip on the shield and searched for a landing site, paying the figures no particular attention. He flew past a vulture frozen in mid-dive. Its wings spread wide, feathers rigid as iron. Its beak gaped open, caught forever in a silent screech. Perseus stared into its eyes, not at them, into them, and registered the perfect preservation of texture, the individual strands visible on each pinion, the terror locked in those glassy orbs. Not weathered. Not carved. Transformed. He rose higher, panic clawing at his chest, and surveyed the island from a safer altitude. They were everywhere. A deer, mid-leap, crashed to pieces against a boulder, he could see the shattered anatomy inside, organs rendered in granite. A man in armor, shield raised too late, his face twisted into a rictus of horror. A woman in a torn chiton, reaching toward something unseen, her stone fingers extended in desperate supplication. The Gorgon's victims. Decades of them. Centuries, perhaps. A gallery of the dead, displayed across the island like trophies. Perseus imagined himself among them. Standing here for eternity, invisible even in death, while his mother rotted in Polydectes' dungeon waiting for a rescue that would never arrive. His hands began to shake. The sickle's weight, which had seemed manageable over open water, now threatened to drag him from the sky. The cave gaped below, a screaming mouth in the cliff face. Perseus dove. The wind seized him. One gust. Sideways. He spun, sky and sea blurring into a single smear of gray. Obsidian spires rushed up. He wrenched his body left, sandals shrieking against the air, and felt volcanic glass slice his forearm as he scraped past. Blood. His blood, hot against cold skin. He hit the ledge hard. Knees buckled. Hands slapped stone. The impact jarred his teeth together, and for a long moment he crouched there, gasping, while the wind howled its frustration above him. Not a hero. Not an arrow from Olympus. A fisherman. A fool. A boy with borrowed weapons, come to butcher something in its sleep. The shield became his eyes. Perseus raised it before crossing the threshold, tilting the bronze until it captured the cave's interior in warped reflection. Straight lines bent. Distances lied. The entrance seemed both infinitely deep and claustrophobically shallow, its dimensions shifting each time he adjusted the angle. He stepped forward. The darkness swallowed him. Sound changed inside. His footsteps, careful as he could make them, echoed back multiplied, a dozen Perseuses creeping through the gloom. Water dripped somewhere distant. A smell reached him, blood and musk, sulfur and something sweeter beneath it, like fruit left too long in the sun. The helm pressed against his temples. The shield grew heavy. Sweat poured down his spine, pooling at the small of his back, but he did not lower the bronze. He did not raise his naked eyes. The cave narrowed, forcing him to hunch. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like rotting teeth, scraping his scalp when he misjudged a step. He could see them in the shield's reflection, gray spurs of mineral deposit, harmless in themselves, but contributing to the overwhelming sensation that he had crawled into the belly of some enormous beast. Light appeared ahead. Thin. Silver. Moonlight filtering through cracks in the stone. He followed it. 3 shapes huddled in the chamber at the cave's heart. Perseus pressed himself against the wall and raised the shield higher, terrified that even his breathing might wake them. The reflection showed him everything he wished he had not seen. The 2 outer figures were massive. Copper scales covered their bodies, overlapping like armor forged by a divine smith. Wings of gold folded against their spines, each feather sharp enough to slice flesh. Tusks jutted from jaws too wide for human mouths. They slept heavily, their breathing a rhythmic scrape of metal against stone, their clawed hands interlocked around the smaller form between them. Medusa. He had expected rage. He had expected malice, the creature from the legends, lips peeled into a snarl, fangs dripping venom, eyes burning with the desire to destroy. He had prepared himself to kill an abomination. The woman in the shield's reflection was curled into a ball, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around her own body as though trying to hold herself together. Her frame spoke of starvation, ribs visible through cracked skin, collarbones jutting like handles. The serpents crowning her skull writhed even in sleep, their movements sluggish but constant, and as Perseus watched, one of them struck, fangs sinking into the soft tissue behind her ear. Medusa whimpered. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Not the snarl of a monster. Not the hiss of a predator denied its prey. A whimper. The noise a child makes during a nightmare, calling for comfort that will not come. Her cheeks glistened wet in the silver light. She was crying. Tears tracked down her ruined face, pooling in the hollows beneath her closed eyes. Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to reach him, prayers or pleas or simply the fragments of a dream from which she could not wake. Perseus' sword arm dropped to his side. This was not a beast. This was not a creature deserving execution. This was a woman, broken, suffering, abandoned at the edge of the world, and he had flown here to separate her head from her shoulders. For glory? No. Even in his most honest moments, he could not claim glory as motive. He was here because a king wanted his mother and had found a convenient way to remove her son from the equation. He was here because the gods had handed him weapons and pointed him at a target, never explaining what that target had done to deserve annihilation. He was not a hero. He was an executioner. The sickle trembled in his grip. The shield began to lower, his arm, suddenly weak, unable to bear its weight. He needed to think. He needed to understand. He needed, the bronze edge struck stone. The clang was small. Insignificant. A tap of metal against rock, no louder than a dropped coin. In the silence of the Gorgon's lair, it echoed like a thunderclap. One of the serpents on Medusa's head snapped upright. Its tongue flickered, tasting the air. Its blank eyes, vertical pupils dilated in the darkness, turned toward the entrance. Toward him. Perseus froze. The serpent swayed. Behind it, its sisters began to stir, first one, then three, then a dozen, each lifting from Medusa's skull to track the source of disturbance. The Gorgon's eyelids fluttered. In the reflection of his shield, Perseus watched the lashes begin to part. Chapter 4 Liberation and Curse. The serpents rose as one. Perseus pressed himself against the cave wall, shield raised, watching the reflection transform. Where moments ago a crown of sleeping vipers had draped across Medusa's skull, now dozens of bodies reared upright, black-green muscles coiling, forked tongues tasting air saturated with his fear. They swayed in eerie unison, a living halo of fangs and hunger, their hissing building into a sound like water striking hot coals. They could smell him. Even invisible, even holding his breath until his lungs screamed, he reeked of sweat and adrenaline and the copper tang of his own blood still seeping from the gash on his forearm. The serpents tracked the scent, heads turning slowly, methodically, triangulating his position with predator precision. Behind them, copper scraped stone. Stheno stirred. Her massive form shifted, wings unfolding with a shriek of metal against rock. Beside her, Euryale's golden plumage rustled, each feather catching the thin moonlight as she rolled onto her side. Their breathing changed, deeper, sharper, the rhythm of creatures surfacing from ancient sleep. Perseus did not move. Could not move. His legs had locked, muscles frozen in the paralysis of absolute terror. The sickle weighed 1,000 pounds in his grip. The shield trembled, bronze catching the reflection of serpents still swaying, still searching, still tightening their focus on the empty space where an invisible boy stood waiting to die. He had seconds. Less. The sisters would wake fully. Medusa would open her eyes. And he would become another statue in this gallery of the dead, trapped forever at the edge of the world while his mother rotted in Polydectes' dungeon. Now. The voice sliced through his panic, sharp, amused, utterly without fear. Hermes. The trickster god, the messenger, the being who had handed him these weapons and pointed him toward slaughter. The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing his ears to arrive directly in his skull. Now, boy. While she still dreams of mercy. Perseus closed his eyes. Not the shield eyes, those remained locked on the bronze surface, tracking movement through warped reflection. His physical eyes. The ones connected to a soul still struggling to accept what must happen. He squeezed them shut and let the god's voice guide his arm. In the shield, Medusa's lashes parted. Her eyes, yellow, vertical pupilled, bloodshot, opened to the silver light. Perseus watched their reflection and waited for the killing gaze to find him, to pierce his invisibility, to turn his bones to granite and his heart to stone. She looked at the shield instead. At him. Through him. The reflection showed her ruined face clearly, cracked skin mapped with suffering, tear tracks gleaming on hollow cheeks, lips forming a word he could not hear. Her chin rose. Her neck extended, not in attack, not in defense, but in offering. She knows, he understood with sudden, horrible clarity. She wants this. The serpents parted. They pulled away from her throat as though commanded, revealing pale flesh stretched over tendons and veins, a vulnerability impossible in any natural creature. Medusa held his gaze through the bronze mirror, and in her eyes Perseus saw no monster. He saw exhaustion. He saw relief. He saw a woman asking to be released from a prison of flesh she had never chosen to inhabit. The sickle moved. Adamantine bit through air, through scales, through bone. The blade met no resistance, divine metal against cursed tissue, severing centuries of torment in a single arc. Black blood sprayed across the cave floor. The serpent spasmed once, twice, and went still, hanging limp as wet rope. The head fell. And the world exploded into light. Perseus staggered backward, shield raised against brilliance no metal could reflect. The headless body before him did not collapse. It convulsed, spine arching, limbs thrashing against stone, and then it tore itself apart. White fire erupted from the severed neck. Not blood, not ichor, but radiance so pure it bleached the cave walls, burned afterimages into his squeezed-shut eyes. A sound filled the chamber, thunder and birdsong and the crash of waves, layered impossibly into a single note of creation. Something emerged from the light. Wings first, vast, feathered, impossibly white against the darkness of the Gorgon's lair. Then a body, equine, muscled, gleaming with newborn perfection. Hooves struck stone and sparked. A mane tossed, scattering droplets of amniotic gold. Eyes opened, blue as the Aegean at midday, clear as the sky Perseus had flown beneath hours ago. Pegasus. The winged horse reared, screaming triumph, and launched himself toward the crack in the cave ceiling. Stone shattered. Moonlight poured through the widening gap. And the creature Perseus had released from Medusa's womb rose into the night, trailing light like a comet, free. A second figure stepped from the ruined corpse. This one walked upright, a man, broad-shouldered, golden-skinned, clutching a sword that burned with its own inner fire. Chrysaor. The warrior of the golden blade. He spared one glance for Perseus, neither gratitude nor malice, simply acknowledgement, and strode toward the cave entrance without looking at the body from which he had been born. The children of Poseidon did not mourn their mother. They fled her, as though her curse might still contaminate their perfection. Perseus stood frozen, sickle dripping black blood, watching divinity abandon its vessel. He had expected death. He had prepared for horror. He had not imagined birth, had not considered the possibility that killing Medusa would release something beautiful into a world so determined to crush beauty beneath its heel. The head, Hermes whispered. Grab it. Move. The screaming began. Athena's wail shattered stalagmites. Perseus dropped into a crouch, hands slapping against wet stone, scrambling for the head he had severed. The serpents brushed his fingers, cold now, lifeless, muscles still twitching with residual nerve impulses. He seized them by the roots and shoved the entire mass into the silver cabesus at his hip. The bag accepted its cargo without resistance. Divine weaving. Bottomless interior. A prison designed to contain weapons too dangerous for mortal hands. He did not have time to feel revulsion. Euryale crashed past him, golden wings whipping wine through the chamber, talons raking stone where he had crouched half a second before. Athena followed, slower, heavier, but her grief had granted her terrible precision. The sisters could not see him, but they could hear his breathing, smell his fear, feel the displacement of air as he scrambled toward the exit. Murderer. The word boomed through the cave like an avalanche, and Perseus did not know which sister had spoken. It did not matter. They were both hunting now, both weeping, both filling the chamber with sounds no human throat could produce, the mourning of immortals confronted with a loss they had never been built to comprehend. He reached the entrance. The sandals responded to thought, wings beating against his ankles, lifting him from stone and hurling him into open air. Behind him, copper claws scraped the cliff face. Golden feathers sliced the space where his head had been. Up he climbed. The sisters pursued, but they were creatures of earth, weighted by grief and metal armor. The helm of Hades hid him from their sight. The sandals of Hermes outpaced their wings. He rose into the night sky, alone, clutching a bag stained with blood, and did not let himself breathe until the island of Sarpedon had shrunk to a speck of darkness on the horizon. Dawn found him above Libya. The ocean had fallen away hours ago, replaced by an endless expanse of gold. Dunes rolled beneath him like frozen waves, their crests catching the rising sun, their troughs pooled with purple shadow. Heat shimmered from the sand, creating mirages, lakes and forests and cities, none of them real, all of them taunting him with visions of a world he no longer belonged to. The cabezus hung heavy against his thigh. Not physically heavy. The bag's divine construction negated weight. But Perseus could sense what rested inside, a face frozen in final expression, eyes closed forever, serpents dangling like the hair they had replaced. He imagined her features relaxing into peace. He imagined them twisted into accusation. He did not open the bag to check. Something warm seeped through the silver weave. Perseus glanced down and found black blood spreading across his hip, staining the rough fabric of his chiton, burning where it contacted skin. The cabezus leaked, not through any flaw in its construction, but because Medusa's blood refused containment. It sought escape. It sought soil. It sought to complete whatever curse the gods had woven into her very cells. A drop fell. Perseus watched it tumble, black as obsidian, glinting in the sunlight, trailing vapor as it descended toward the golden sands. It struck a dune crest and vanished into the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. The sand erupted. A viper burst from the impact site, scales glistening wet with whatever moisture the blood had granted. It coiled, reared, and hissed at the empty sky before burrowing into the shelter of shadow. Perseus stared, horror crawling up his spine. Another drop fell. Another serpent emerged, this one longer, darker, fangs already gleaming with venom. He was seeding the desert with her legacy. Every kilometer he flew, every moment the bag remained against his body, Medusa's blood sowed death across the barren earth. The Libya he passed over would never recover. Generations of travelers would die here, bitten by creatures born from a murdered woman's wounds. The curse continued through him, used him as its instrument, spread through his unwitting collaboration. Perseus climbed higher, as though altitude might slow the dripping, but the blood followed gravity regardless of intention. Below him, the desert writhed with newborn life, vipers and cobras and asps, a plague of serpents blossoming from sterile sand, claiming the land for a mistress who no longer existed to command them. Even death, he thought, the phrase arriving from nowhere, settling into his bones with the weight of prophecy, cannot heal a wound inflicted by gods. He flew on. The blood continued to fall. And the desert continued to drink, birthing horrors with every drop, ensuring the world would never forget the price of divine cruelty, or the fisherman who had been its final instrument. Behind him, the trail of serpents stretched toward the horizon, a map of his passage, a record of his crime, a testament inscribed in venom and scales upon the golden scroll of the Libyan sands.